Do you know what's one of the most common comments that I get? Yeah, I wish I knew the exact one, but among calling John a villain, a victim, both, neither, or just calling me an idiot, I get a ton of comments. And what I've noticed in my videos, and even the comment section of UnOrdinary itself, is that people are claiming that John has PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's a thought that I've had too. It would explain a lot of his actions. Right? I think we, as a collective internet, tend to jump to conclusions. And while I think we tend to be accepting in other positive words, I think, especially in the Webtoon comments, we want to be first, you know? We want to get top comments. But we all say that John has PTSD as fast as we can so we can get to the top. But do we really know that? That's my goal today. To see if there's a definitive way to prove or disprove if John has PTSD. And if he does, what he could do or what he has done to help his situation. Now, I need to say I am not a certified therapist. I have no education to say if he has PTSD, so please do not use me for certainty. Please, if you know someone who seeks help or if you have any questions about that, seek someone with education or a certification. But if I don't have education or credentials, how do I plan on proving or disproving if someone has PTSD? Well, research. In fact, researching more than I've ever researched on a school project. Which says something about me, but I'm not sure if it's good or bad, so I'm moving past it. So, using a very, very useful and trustworthy site, I was able to find this article, the PTSD Checklist, PCL, Reliability, Validity, and Diagnostic Utility, which it really didn't help 100%. It was about Vietnam theater veterans, and the rates of PTSD and methods and other stuff. But luckily, the first line was able to help me a lot more than the rest of the article. The PTSD Checklist, PCL, is a new self-reporting rating scale for assessing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The PCL consists of 17 items which correspond to the DSM-3R system of PTSD. The PTSD checklist, a rating scale checklist kind of thing where you don't want a high score. But I can do you one better. The checklist here is for the DSM-3R, which doesn't make sense to you, but it just means it's old. It was 24 years ago. But now, the DSM-5R is the newer version, and it has its own version of that checklist. But now it's not only a checklist, it's a 3-part self-evaluation. So let's go through all 3 parts. The first part is relatively simple. As simple as PTSD, I guess. It's narrowing down the moment in your life which caused the potential PTSD. We can eliminate a lot of these, from natural disasters, fire, explosion, transportation accidents, a ton of these. However, there are a few of them that are possible. Physical assaults, captivity, and the most interesting, serious injury, harm, or death that you have caused someone else. But that brings up an interesting question. If I were to ask you what event caused John's trauma, what would you say? Because I'll be honest, there are a few possibilities. And yes, it is very sad that John has multiple different ways he could have had trauma. But there are 2 different moments that correspond to 2 different events. On one hand, we have the obvious answer. Serious injury, harm, or death that you have caused someone else. Pretty much lines up with Claire in the theme of Monster. John hurt people he actually cared about. There's no getting around that. We've just seen that newest UnOrdinary episode. We're all very worried where that's going. However, John has been held captive by Keon. In captivity, he was physically, mentally, and verbally abused. And while it's possible to have trauma from 2 different events, they both manifest in John in different ways. Part 2, the PCSL, isn't important in this scenario, mainly because it's asking for details when, I'll be honest, we don't have a ton of those. But part 3 is the most important, asking for a self-evaluation. And while I'm not John, we can use moments from UnOrdinary to answer these questions. There are 20 questions that this self-evaluation asks for, and each question they ask for a scale from 0 to 4, being not bothered at all by this problem, to 4 being very apparent in my life. And I would start out with the ones that John shows nothing in, questions where he has a 0. However, it's sad to say out of the 20 questions, there's only really one that he has a 0 in. Number 12, loss in interest in things that you used to enjoy. But it's still kind of weird to say he might have a 1 in that. Remember that thing that everyone hated? The hair gel? Yeah, when John started to relive some of his past trauma, he stopped doing that. Why he did it in the first place, I could never understand. But when Serafina points it out, all he has to say is, "Oh, nah. Takes too long every morning. Not worth it." If his hair gel is an interest, then I guess that's a 1. But let's just say it's not an interest. Mainly because an extra 1 isn't really going to change anything. Out of the rest of the 19, there are 3 that are iffy. Maybe a 1 on the 0 to 4 scale. Trouble remembering parts of the stressful events, having difficulty concentrating, trouble falling, or staying asleep. There are moments where John's memory seems a little hazy, like he has trouble remembering, but there's nothing too major. Meanwhile, trouble sleeping isn't seemingly a troubling problem. Don't get me wrong, there are moments, like here, when John is brooding right next to his bed, but that's unlikely to be trouble falling asleep and more of him planning out how to hurt people. Meanwhile, some of you will point out that John has had several moments where he's been awakened by his stressful events. Like when he was in the infirmary, when he wakes up and then decks Arlo in the face. And even earlier, when Serafina is sleeping over, he's reminded by his past and violently wakes up. However, that would fall into the category of repeated disturbing dreams of the stressful experience, which is definitely higher up. Continuing on, there are more problems that are iffy, but if they're problems that John is dealing with, then they're big problems. There are 3 problems that John seemingly has. Being super alert or watchful on guard, feeling jumpy or easily scared, taking too many risks or doing things that could cause you harm. And yeah, I guess? John has all of those problems, but it's not really his fault. We see John say to Eisen in the fake interview, "To put it simply, we low tiers don't have any rights. We're not able to defend ourselves. Everywhere is a danger zone for us, so we have to stay alert at all times. Life is scary for us. We can't do what we want or say what we think. One simple run-in can put us out for days or even a week." John, as a crippled, had to stay alert at all times, constantly being jumpy, constantly being scared, because any moment could be a moment where he gets hurt. And it's also justifiable that he's reckless, because sometimes that's his only choice. Like at the beginning with Gavin, you can really call these actions very reckless and super dangerous, but that was the only way he would get out of a fight in one piece, by throwing another student out the window. Now it's iffy he's like that because it might be that he's scared of others betraying him, or it might be that he's just a low tier. But it seems he had that reputation even as a high tier, of being super jumpy, of being super paranoid and throwing himself into fights, even with adults. So that's a 2 on the scale for all of those. Meanwhile, the other ones are very, very apparent. I don't even think I need to go through moments where he has things like this. Repeated disturbing unwanted memories of the stressful event. Repeated disturbing dreams of the stressful event. Suddenly feeling or acting as if the stressful event were actually happening again. Feeling very upset when something reminded you of the stressful event. Having strong physical reactions to something reminding you of the stressful event. Avoiding memories, thoughts, feelings related to the stressful event. Avoiding external reminders of the stressful event. Having strong negative beliefs of yourself, other people, or the world. Blaming yourself or someone else for a stressful experience or what happened after it. Having strong negative feelings such as fear, horror, anger, guilt, or shame. Feeling distant or cut off from other people. And irritable behavior, angry outbursts, and acting aggressively. Yeah, John has a 3 or 4 in all of those. So after that long checklist of random problems that John seemingly has all of, it isn't really necessary for me to go in depth. So what's the result of this checklist, this self-evaluation? Well, a score of 31 to 33 is indicative of probable PTSD. And John has 41. Now, I may have scored more than I should have, but even if I drop some of them, he'll still be beyond the threshold of PTSD. So, looks like everyone was right. What was the point of this video? Oh, right, yeah. I wanted to see what John could do or was doing to help his situation. And here's a staple of my John videos, asking for your opinion. You see, John has done things to help calm down or even fix some of his problems. However, there are still many things he could have done. Let me explain. There's a moment in season 2, after Serafina responsibly looks at all the evidence and comes to her own conclusion unburdened by hatred or anger. Which, good on you, Serafina. Sometimes we make conclusions way too soon. But she did bring up an interesting question. But something still doesn't make sense. For some reason, John transferred into Wellston with a crippled persona. Why? After what happened in New Boston, he no longer wanted a part in the hierarchy. I get that, but wouldn't it have been better to become a mid-tier instead? Then nobody would have paid attention to him. And he'd have no problem blending in. He could have easily lived an average life. So why did he choose to be completely powerless? Why go to that extreme? No matter how you look at it, it's a bad idea. When I first read that, I had my own idea why. First, I thought it was a form of punishment. John doesn't believe that he deserves any power. So being the lowest form of anyone in the school is a form of punishment. Punishing himself for his past actions, for his past mistakes, for the people he used to hurt. Going to the bottom because he deserves to be at the bottom. However, researching PTSD, I have a different opinion. I think that John didn't think he could handle the power. You know when people used to be addicted to something, and then they don't go to places anymore because they don't want to be in that position again? John doesn't want to have power over anyone. He doesn't want to be above anyone. Because any amount of power over someone might remind John of who he was. And it's clear as day, when he's attacking someone before his mental breakdown, remember this moment? Where he's easily beating up this kid, he remembers his past mistakes. However, on the flip side, John lies. A major part of dealing with PTSD is telling people you're close with. Things that might trigger you, things that might upset you, things that they can do to help you calm down or just when you need personal space. John, by simply moving past what happened, isn't dealing with it. By turning over a new leaf, he's ignoring the other side. And it shows. John is slipping away, turning into what he became a cripple to avoid in the first place. So what do you think? Was this just a useless video? Because of course he had PTSD and he did the best he could? Or could he have done more? Well, outside of therapy. Because if the school offered therapy, literally every student would be there. But, like always, thank you for watching.